Hey guys, it's Allie. Welcome back to Infertile AF, the podcast. This is episode 19 called Shira. So Shira is a fellow Brooklyn mom. We met in the neighborhood at SoulCycle. We are both Noah devotees. You've heard me talk about Noah's class before. So she and I met there and started talking. And then one night, a couple of years ago, we were at a friend's birthday party at a bar. And of course, as one does in a bar, we started talking about infertility. And she said, I told her I was working on a book and possibly a podcast. And she said, ooh, I want to tell you my story. So this is her story, and I will let her tell it in her own words. But just to give you the gist, Shira and her husband, Craig, tried for 2 years before they finally got pregnant. And the pregnancy did not exactly go as planned. So I'm going to let Shira tell you in her own words. It's a really good one. And get some tissues ready because I definitely cried a few times here. So thank you to Shira for being so open and honest. And without further ado, this is Shira's infertility story. Hi, Shira. Thank you for doing this.
Anytime, Allie.
It's so good to see you. I remember we met through SoulCycle, and yes. I remember we were out one night at a mutual friend's birthday, and we started, I don't know how we got on the subject, but we started talking about having a hard time maybe you had read my article.
I had read your SoulCycle article,
okay.
And then I think you mentioned that you were thinking about doing this podcast. And
okay.
I said, that's amazing.
Yes.
And I think I told you that when I was going through this whole process, that like seeing the huge waiting room of people trying to get pregnant, I thought if I ever wrote a book about it, I wanted to call it like The Land of Flat Bellies, but nothing ever came out of that.
Yes, that's so good.
But I think it's amazing that you're doing
So there
this.
we were in a bar talking about like infertility, which is always a great party topic. Do you always want to have babies? Did you always want to be a mom?
Yeah. I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and I just always assumed I was going to have kids, get married, have kids. That was going to be my path.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you and your husband meet?
We met. So my sister and my husband Craig's cousin are best friends. And it was my sister's birthday party. And she said her friend, Craig's cousin, was going to bring Craig and his twin brother Lloyd. And so they came to the party, and Craig happened to sit down next to me. And we started talking, and it was
meh.
At least from my perspective, it was meh. But then apparently I made an impression on him, and he the next day asked his cousin for my phone number, and his cousin asked my sister, and my sister asked me. And I said, oh, maybe it just wasn't the best impression the first time. So he called me, and the first time we spoke on the phone, we were on the phone for 2 hours. And we went on our first date about 2 weeks later, and we have literally spoken every day since our first date.
Well, you talked on the phone. That's old school.
It was very old school. Well, it was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was in 2002 that we met.
Okay. So did you guys talk about, before you got married, did you talk about, the family that you wanted to have and having kids?
Yeah, so he has a twin brother and an older sister, and like I said, I have a younger sister, younger brother, and we just always, we wanted to have kids. We got married these days on the younger side. I was 27. He was 26.
So was I, 27. It does seem so young now.
It's so young now.
Yeah.
So we had always said, we want to have kids. We had both wanted 2 kids each. And then his sister got married the year after we did, his older sister, and it just turned into this thing where, oh, you're going to have kids before we are. No, you're going to have kids before we are. And I remember at her shower, we were filling out these little cards to put in a box that she wouldn't open until her 10-year anniversary. And I wrote on the card saying, see, I told you would have kids before us, not knowing that I was going to wish that I had kids before her later on. But so, a couple of years went by, and then we decided, okay, let's start trying.
Yeah.
And that's when our journey began.
Yeah. So tell me what happened.
I never once miscarried.
Okay.
About when I was 29, probably about April 2007, or about 2 months before that, I went off the birth control pill because we decided, okay, let's start trying. I'm 29. And I knew from friends, go to the drugstore, get the ovulation kit, pee on the stick, and then smiley face, oh, you're about to ovulate.
Right.
So I figured so many people I knew, they used that, they got pregnant the first time. So I didn't get pregnant the first month that we tried. Okay, no big deal.
Right.
And then sex started to get less and less romantic and more like a business.
Yes, I call it sex on demand.
So not only sex on demand, but my medical history, I've always been prone to urinary tract infections. So
Same with me.
So I would have to go to the bathroom before we had sex. Then we would have sex, and Craig would shove a pillow under my tush so I could stick my legs straight up in the air.
Which is such a hot look.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
And then, but on top of that, I had had 2 full glasses of water before because I wanted to stay in that up position for half an hour. And anyone who has had UTIs in the past knows that after you have intercourse, the best thing to do is pee right away. But
Right.
you can't do that if you're trying to get pregnant. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to go to the bathroom so that I wasn't going to get a UTI on top of everything else.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like that for half an hour, and then I would go to the bathroom.
Are you like timing it? You have like
I had my clock next to me. I'd be like, okay, half an hour. Okay, now I can go.
Yes. Yes.
I wanted every chance.
Yes.
To try to get pregnant.
UTIs, just a sidebar, that UTIs are the worst.
I would never wish them
worst.
on my worst enemy.
Yes.
They are so incredibly painful.
Yes.
We did that for about 5 months or so. And at some point I decided, let me call my OBGYN because nothing is happening.
Right.
And aside from everything else, another part of my medical history was that in between periods, I would spot. So about a week and a half before my period, I would start spotting.
Did they explain why, or does that have some sort of medical explanation?
No, it's just the way my body was, but clearly I was starting to shed my uterine lining before I was really supposed to shed it at my period.
Okay.
At menstruation. So I had called the office and they said, well, typically what we do is you try for 6 months and then you can come in. So try. So we tried for 6 months, and I went into the office and they did blood work to make sure that I wasn't going through early menopause or anything like that. But all of that came back normal, and she said, so you know what, I think you should go to a fertility doctor. So I started seeing my fertility doctor in November 2007.
Okay.
I went through my history and told him about the spotting, and he said, oh, you spot before your period? That's easy. That's an easy fix. You're going to be pregnant pretty quickly. I know the practice is very, very well known. Mm-hmm. And, you go into the waiting room and it's probably about half a block long. And there is not a seat to be had.
Isn't that
and
wild?
People are standing.
Yes, I was always so
many
surprised
people.
going into those waiting rooms, like how packed they were at 6 a.m. when you
Well,
have to go in to get your blood work.
Blood work first thing.
I know, but
so they can regulate.
And
the
did you have that thing where nobody was making eye contact with each other and kind of trying to be on the DL?
That I don't remember. I just remember it being so packed, and I remember looking around and I would see a mom who had kids already, and I think to myself, well, why is she here? She already has kids. Mm-hmm. Thinking she couldn't possibly take my place, in air quotes as I'm doing that right now, because it's my body, it's my pregnancy or my hopeful pregnancy. And whether or not she gets pregnant has no bearing on whether or not I get pregnant. But It was just this feeling that I want to be pregnant once because I had never been pregnant. But that was like my waiting room thing, and I remember seeing brochures about how actually the stress that is attendant to infertility is equal to the stress of being diagnosed with a severe illness like cancer or with losing a family member. Yeah. And those are my waiting room memories, like seeing those brochures, having those feelings of extreme jealousy.
Yes, that comes up a lot. That is a very common thing, and the people that I've talked to about this so far and I talked about in my own story too, is that whole thing of secondary infertility, where like people look at someone with a baby and think, why is she being so greedy? She already has her baby.
Right.
Which is so, it makes sense, but it's also is so messed up too.
Right, because it had no bearing on whether or not I was going to get pregnant.
Right.
But it was
exactly.
like, I want that one try, that one opportunity.
Let me ask you this. How was this affecting your relationship with Craig at the time?
Our relationship actually stayed the same.
That's great.
Throughout. Craig has a very positive outlook of, it's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. Nothing to worry about until there's really something to worry about. Mm-hmm. Towards the end, when I was actually doing the hormone injections, I will say, oh, they didn't affect me at all. And Craig will be like, yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. You don't realize when you're the one taking them.
Exactly. But,
like, oh, I was batshit? Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Thanks for telling me.
But he, to his credit, he didn't say that until after I had a baby and was feeling fine about things. And I was like, wait, really?
That's a good man. Good move, Craig.
But he was really good throughout the whole thing.
Okay, so you're in the midst of getting treatments. And
yes.
Tell me what happened next.
Okay, so like I said, my doctor said, oh, you spot before your period. Easy fix. So he also said you're very young for the process. And to me, I was 29, and how is that young? My mother had me when she was 25. So by the time she was 29, she'd already had 2 kids. So I was like, how is that young?
It's a different generation.
Different generation. So he put me on a progesterone suppository, which I remember for some reason was liquidy and had to be kept in the refrigerator. And everything that I did with my doctor was in 3-month sets. So I was going to be doing the progesterone, try it for 3 months and see how that works. So I did that, and it wasn't stopping the spotting. And so I did that for 2 months. And then the last month, we happened to have a wedding in Florida. And I said to my doctor, I said, am I going to be allowed to take this on the plane? I don't want, it has to be refrigerated, so it has to go in a cooler. Is TSA going to give me a problem when I'm trying to bring this through?
Was it less than 3 ounces?
it was a lot more than 3 ounces because it was like, however many days worth.
Right.
And I'm like bringing an ice pack on. So he said, you know what, I'm going to give you, it's actually an oral progesterone pill, but I still want you to use it vaginally. I said, okay. And by the way, just when you're doing the vaginal suppository, it's kind of like right after you have sex trying to get pregnant, you don't want it to all leak out because it has to be absorbed into your system. So again, there I am sitting in bed for half an hour.
Legs up.
In the air.
UTI looming. You've got a lot going on.
Like, come on now. So, but surprisingly, this oral used as a suppository progesterone did the trick. It stopped my spotting. So I was like, boom, I'm going to get pregnant now. Mm-hmm. Didn't get pregnant. So then he said, okay, we're going to try Clomid. Mm-hmm. So that was the next 3 months. So I tried Clomid, and I think the first time I did Clomid was without the progesterone. And then I was spotting him before that. But I had heard of friends who got pregnant when they used Clomid, and I said, every time I was like, it's going to work this time. I know it's going to work this time. So 3 rounds of that didn't work. So then he said, well, Clomid can also sometimes cause spotting, so now we're going to do the Clomid and the progesterone for 3 months.
Oh, wait.
So I'm back to
it causes UTIs. No,
so I do the Clomid and the progesterone, thinking, okay, well, we know that this progesterone, and he put me on the one that actually stopped the spotting, and I figured, well, we know the progesterone stops the spotting, and the Clomid is going to stimulate my ovaries to release eggs, so it's going to work this time. First time it didn't work, second time it didn't work, third time it didn't work. So he said, okay, well, now I want you to do IUIs. Mm-hmm. So you have to go to the class, and Craig will go with you to learn about doing the injections. Because, I gave myself the hormone injections for the first part of the month, but then the trigger one, HCG, is that what it was? Craig had to do because it was in my tush, because it had to be intramuscular. So he needed to learn that too. So we went to the class. I did all the injections, and again, I knew a handful of people who had gotten pregnant from IUI. And I said, it's going to work for me. This is going to work. So I do the first round. I do the injections, and my doctor is, doing the ultrasound to look at my ovaries, and he said, you have four eggs that are going to come out of this. And so I started joking. I remember I was at my cousin's daughter's high school graduation party, and I'm joking around with my cousins. I'm going to have quads. I'm going to have quads. Oh, the quads are coming. And didn't get pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And then tried IUI again. Didn't get pregnant. Tried IUI the third time. Didn't get pregnant.
Okay. So how much time has passed at this point?
At this point, I had been seeing him for probably a year, maybe, because it was, let's say, 3 months progesterone, 3 months Clomid, 3 months progesterone and Clomid, 3 months IUI. Yeah, so about a year. Since we'd been doing this for a year, he said, the next step, I have a choice. I can do a round of IVF, or I can do laparoscopy to see what's going on inside surgery. Mm-hmm. I said, I want to do IVF. I just want to get pregnant. Mm-hmm. Let's just do this. Mm-hmm. I remembered about learning about IVF when I was in health class in high school.
Did you?
Yeah.
See, I never did. I'm older than you, but so we weren't that progressive at the time. But yeah, that was never. I didn't know anything about it.
See, I knew about the IUIs, IVF. I knew all about it, and I said, you know what? They're going to be, they're combining the egg and the sperm in a petri dish and they're putting back in me. And how could this not work?
Exactly.
How could this?
Science
not work?
Is amazing, isn't it?
Incredible. So I choose the round of IVF. I did all the hormones to stimulate my ovaries. I don't remember my exact count. My vague recollection is that they were able to collect 8 eggs.
Okay.
They were able to fertilize 6, I think, and they transferred 2. And however, the other ones were not viable for freezing. So that got me disappointed right off the bat. Like, granted, I was hopeful, like, this is going to work, I'm going to get pregnant, but why were these other 4 not even freezable?
So did you do, PGD testing on the viable ones?
No, I did not do that. They didn't think there was a need for it.
Okay.
So it was just a straight IVF cycle. And I remember from all my IUIs and from IVF, a nurse always called and said, I'm sorry, it came back negative. And I have never cried so much as I did with every single negative pregnancy test, especially because I was using the progesterone that actually delays your period. So I always had to do a pregnancy test anyway to know if I needed to stop the progesterone, even when I was just doing straight progesterone. Okay. So even if it wasn't a blood test, I had to at least take a pregnancy test and just have that visual of, nope, you're not pregnant.
Yeah.
And like I said, I cried a lot.
Yeah.
I was doing a document review. I'm a lawyer in New Jersey, and I was living in the city at the time in Manhattan. And I was driving back, and I got the call from the nurse, and I had to pull over because I was just sobbing.
Yeah.
I think that was one of my IUIs that happened with.
The devastation and just the sadness. It's just straight up the deepest sadness.
Yeah. And I had never been a big crier growing up.
Yeah.
Some of my friends, they go to the movies and they bawl, and I'd be like, oh, okay. And literally the amount that I cried that year was probably more than my entire lifetime combined up until that
I just
point.
got full body chills. I'm so sorry that you went through that.
So that IUI, anyway, that first IVF came back negative, and I went to my doctor, and he said to me, okay, we can do I'm going to give you a choice again, a second round of IVF or the laparoscopy. He said, but I'm telling you now that if you do this round of IVF, I'm going to strong arm you and you're going to do the surgery. We went to Florida for Thanksgiving, and I'm with my sister-in-law. Just to rewind, she had us all come together to announce that she was pregnant, and we were having breakfast, and when she told us, Craig put his hand on my knee under the table, and I quickly drew it away because I thought I was just I couldn't have that touch of sympathy
because you would lose
because I thought I was going to lose it.
Yeah.
And I held it together for about half an hour, and then we're like, okay, we have to go. And as soon as we walked out into the hallway, I just broke down. I was hysterical. And again, I was happy for her, for my sister-in-law, that she was pregnant, and I was I have my niece whom I love
Right.
dearly, but at the time it was like a knife to the heart. And I remember his sister, so hard. His sister called later because we had been at her apartment, and she said, I just wanted to check in on Shira just to make sure she's okay, because it was just devastating. Mm-hmm. So we were in Florida, and I decided, you know what? Let's do the laparoscopy, because let's say hypothetically I have endometriosis, which is what he was going to be looking for, and that's the reason I'm not getting pregnant, then all of these trials are just going to be for naught. So I booked the surgery, and I had the surgery in December 2008. And I remember my doctor saying to Craig, my mother and my mother-in-law were there too, along with Craig, and he said, you know what, go get lunch. The surgery's going to take at least an hour. I will call you when it's done. So he goes in, and they first put a scope through your belly button so that you can see, because the endometriosis is on the outside, which is why you can only see it through surgery. And then if I were going to have it, then they would take another, it's not a scope, but it's whatever they use to burn it off. And they go, it's a very, very small incision, and they go through in another area, and they have the scope through the belly button, and the other one, they burn it off. So Craig and my mother-in-law went to lunch. They had just ordered their food, and they only went like a block or two from the hospital. And my doctor calls and says, we're done. And Craig's like, what do you mean you're done? We haven't even ordered lunch. I apparently had endometriosis everywhere, on the front of my uterus, the back of my uterus, my fallopian tubes, my ovaries. So I think what most of the time that the surgery takes is sometimes they're just hunting around for it. But he saw it as soon as he got in there and just burned everything off.
Wow.
And was done in like 45 minutes.
And you had no idea that you had it?
I had no idea. I mean, I would get, occasional crampiness from periods, but I did not have that debilitating pain that is typical with endometriosis, especially considering the extent to which I had it. I mean, it was everywhere. The funny part, though, is apparently as I was coming out of the anesthesia, this part I don't remember at all. But then when I was coming out of the anesthesia and saying things that I don't remember, and then I'm in the recovery room when my doctor comes in, and the first thing I say to him is, I'm prone to UTIs, and I know I had a catheter. I just want to let you know that. He's like, oh, I know. I said, how do you know that? He said, you must have told me like 5 or 6 times coming out of the anesthesia. We already gave you antibiotics. I was like, oh, okay.
Like, it's that UTI girl coming through again.
UTI girl.
Like, have you heard about my UTI?
I know this podcast is about infertility and UTIs.
It's about all things. All lady business.
All lady business. So he burned everything off. And it was very fast recovery from that. I mean, the incisions are so small. And he said, okay, we're just going to we'll start another round of IVF. So I got the birth control pill, because I don't even know if that's still the protocol anymore, but at least when I did it, you were on birth control pills for about 3 weeks. And then instead of the week where, you're off for your period, then I started the hormone injections. And I remember there were Lupron shots, which gave me headaches, which were awesome. So I did the shots, and I went through everything, and I had the egg retrieval again because none of mine had been viable. I'm not viable, freezable.
Right.
I don't remember how many eggs, but again, none of them were, my extras were not freezable. There were no freezable embryos. Okay. Which again disappointed me. Yeah. And they transferred 2 embryos. And then you wait about, I think, a week from the transfer until you find out.
I think for me it was 10 days.
Oh, maybe, maybe it was 10 days. It's like 7 to 10 days, whatever it was. So in that time...
It's a great 10 days, right?
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Were you working the whole time, too?
I was working the whole time.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
So in that time, I started spotting. And I started breaking out. And I'm like so upset. I said, I'm totally getting my period. This is awful. And we went to a birthday party. And like I said, my sister-in-law was pregnant, and she was at that birthday party. And so the birthday adults, mother, came up and was talking to us. She's like, oh, you're having a baby. That's so wonderful. And she looks at me and she says, and when are you having a baby? And I was just like, and I couldn't help it. I was like, I'm trying. And then I just walked away, and I probably insulted the woman and whatever it is, but it's like she meant well, but
Yes.
I was in the throes of, I'm about to get my period. This is awful.
Yeah. I think it's a common thing that people say to women,
Yeah,
especially like older women. They're, people they don't know. When are you going to have a baby? Not knowing the trauma that you've been going through for years.
And just as an aside, it was interesting because my parents were at dinner with a whole bunch of their friends, and they're very friendly with our rabbi and his wife, and they were there too. And so they were talking about, oh, our son has 3 kids now, and this one has this, and this one has that. And so my rabbi says to my father, so when is Shira going to have kids already? And my father pulls him aside and explains everything that's happened. And my father had called me at work. He said, and, Rabbi Rogoff said, anytime you want to talk about it, he was happy to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I just started bawling.
Oh.
But anyway. So we got home, and this must have been like the weekend before I was supposed to go in for the blood test.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm convinced I'm about to get my period. And Craig said, just take a pregnancy test. At least that way, if it's negative, Mm-hmm. And so I pee on the stick, and usually it takes like a full minute or something to say anything. 10 seconds later, it says pregnant.
Oh my God. Oh, you bought the fancy ones?
No.
With the words?
Well, I'm gonna get to why it was so quick in a second. So I'm like freaking out. I'm like, Craig, it says it's pregnant. I am freaking out. And then I said, well, wait a second. I haven't had the blood test yet. What are the chances that this could say pregnant and it could still be negative?
Right. You're like, go buy 25 more of these tests.
So I think it was a Sunday. So the next morning, like those next 12 hours or however, less than 24 hours dragged, because all I wanted to do was get to the doctor's office and get this blood test. And I go in, and the nurses take my blood, and I said, I took a pregnancy test yesterday and it said positive. What are the chances that was like a false positive? She said, our blood work picks up on such small amounts and those pregnancy tests do not. So if it said pregnant, you are most likely pregnant. I'm like, okay. But I didn't want to trust it until I heard. Of
course. You can't get your hopes up until you know for sure.
Exactly. So I had my blood work done, and then I went to work. And like I said, for every negative IUI and the negative IVF, the nurse always called. And all of a sudden my phone rings and I pick it up, and it's my doctor himself. And he said, you're pregnant. And I was like, oh my God. I had waited forever. I had never been pregnant. I can't believe I'm getting so choked up.
No, that's good.
And I was over the moon. I was ecstatic. So I go in, I guess so that's exactly 4 weeks pregnant. So I go in the following week to my fertility doctor, and he does an ultrasound, and he said, you're pregnant with twins.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, that explains why the pregnancy test came up so quickly.
Yeah.
Because when you have multiples, then the hormones are even higher. So he said, it looks like the one is a little bigger than the other, but it's fine, no problem. And then the next week at 6 weeks, so I went back, and at 6 weeks, when you go to a fertility doctor and their equipment is so specialized, we heard both heartbeats. And
oh, you did?
My husband just leaned over and kissed me, and it was just amazing.
Oh,
it was an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it's the best sound in the world, those little heartbeats.
So I'm going through, and I'm pregnant, and I am happy, and I had not been this happy, and I couldn't even remember how long.
Were you telling people at this point? Or was it, you want to wait till that benchmark?
I wanted to wait until the 12-week benchmark.
Yeah.
But to some extent, a lot of people knew, especially my family, knew that I was going through all this and that I had the pregnancy test, like the test. So my parents, Craig's parents, and our sisters and brothers all knew about it. But that was it. So a couple weeks later, then I started spotting again. I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
So I go to the hospital, and babies are fine. I was just having some spotting. And I remember saying to my doctor, I am not having, I have this history of spotting, but I am not having any nausea. I am not throwing up. I don't have any breast tenderness. The only evidence that I have that I am pregnant is a pregnancy test and the fact that I don't have a full-on period. And I remember saying, I'm fine with being nauseous. Give me nausea. Give me throwing up. And they're like,
Right.
trust me, if that happens, like, you come back to me and say that you actually wanted it.
Right.
But I didn't have anything.
Okay.
It was like I did not have any sort of physical feelings that I was pregnant at all, except that my belly started growing, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And it started growing faster, I guess, than a typical single pregnancy because I was pregnant with twins.
Okay.
So at 15 weeks, they do a blood test called a quad screen. And they did the quad screen, and I get a call from my doctor that it came back really abnormal, and there's a chance that the twins could have spina bifida. So I had friends at work who had been pregnant with twins, and I started looking up stuff online, and I started reading that, when you have multiple pregnancy, that sometimes the tests come back a little skewed because it is more than one fetus baby. So I was asking my friends at work, you had twins. Did you ever have any abnormal tests? No. I was like, okay, maybe this is just the way, this test was. So I go in so the test was at 15 weeks. I go in for an ultrasound at 16 weeks. And for reasons beyond my comprehension, twin A is totally fine. Twin A was the one closest to my cervix. Twin B, which was higher up, suddenly had almost no amniotic fluid. I think that I don't remember what the measurement was of the deepest pocket, but it was virtually nothing. And the doctor, the fetal specialist there, came in and said, "I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you." These are his words. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It's really bad." So I cried a lot, and I went home, and Craig came home with me, and my mother left work and came in, and I was just devastated. And I went in the next week for another ultrasound, hoping that, this fluid was suddenly gone. Maybe it'll suddenly be back. So I had another ultrasound at 17 weeks. And at that point, still there was virtually no fluid, and the baby's head was already starting to be misshapen because it didn't have the fluid to be floating around in. So the head was actually flattening on one side and becoming elongated. And the other, aside from the physical deformity, the other main problem with the lack of amniotic fluid is that the baby swallows the amniotic fluid, and that promotes lung development. So at this point, I'm only 16 weeks. So what they told me was this. There were 3 potential outcomes. I could have a fetal reduction, which is a nice way of saying abort twin B. I could do absolutely nothing, and there would be a minuscule chance that I would deliver a live baby, but the baby would die in less than 24 hours because it would have absolutely no lung development. Choice number 3 was do absolutely nothing, and the baby would die in utero. But in all that time, that baby would be taking nutrients and space from twin A. And they said that also the bigger the baby got, when it dies in utero, ultimately, because I asked what happens to the baby, because they couldn't deliver it because my other baby was lower down, which they said was actually a good thing.
Okay.
If this were to happen the way that it happened to twin B is better than happening to twin A. Okay. So they said what would happen is that the baby would reabsorb the baby would be reabsorbed into my uterine lining. So the bigger the baby got, more there is to reabsorb, and the reabsorption process could then cause preterm labor for twin A.
Wow.
So after a lot of thought, we decided the safest thing to do to hopefully have a healthy baby was to have a fetal reduction. And Craig was in the room with me, and they use the same needle that they do for an amniocentesis, but they do it with ultrasound guiding, and they inject the needle into the baby's heart, and they inject potassium, and it stops the heart.
I'm going to start bawling right now. This is terrible.
I cried the entire time. And, some people, when they're upset, they eat a lot. For me, it's like I just lose my appetite. And I had to make a conscious effort to continue eating because I had another baby.
Right.
And I had to stay healthy for that baby. And I was like, I can do this. I can do this. And for some reason, the doctor said, who did the fetal reduction, said that I shouldn't have any spotting or anything. And of course, that weekend I started spotting. And Craig was playing golf. And I called my doctor and she said, come into the hospital. And so I went to the hospital and I said, you have to come. I can't do this by myself. And so he met me in the hospital and thank God everything was fine. And with all of this going on, I start thinking back and, when you're pregnant and everything, things are gross and sometimes you have discharge. And I was like, well, was my discharge maybe a little more yellowy than it otherwise was? And maybe if I had caught this, maybe if I had said something, then something could have been done. And my doctor was like, nothing could have been done.
Yeah.
Like this, it just happened.
Yeah.
So I am mentally trying to get through this. And the months, and then a couple weeks later, maybe not even that long, it was Passover. We were at my parents' house. And a couple days later, I get a call from my cousin. I hate to have to tell you this, but apparently I have parvovirus, which is Fifth's disease. And in rare cases, if a pregnant woman gets it, it can cause severe anemia and miscarriage. And so I called my doctor. I said, apparently I've been exposed to parvovirus. And they said, come in now. We're going to do blood work. And I went in and the nurse took the blood and my doctor came in. And this is my OBGYN who I'd been going to for years at this point. And so she knew me. And I said, I think I need to talk to somebody. I said, I can't handle this. I'm I just lost a baby and now I'm potentially exposed to something that could make me lose another one. And so she gave me the number of a doctor. And they called me that day and said, good news, you were already immune to parvovirus. And I was like, it occurred to me when my sister was probably like really little. I remember she had something called Fifth's disease, which is the same thing as parvovirus. And so from being around her, I must have developed an immunity to it.
Wow.
And I was like, all of a sudden I was like, okay, good news. This is good news.
Finally.
The first good news in like a month and a half.
Right.
This is okay. And so I ended up never calling the psychiatrist. Because like I felt like I was doing better. And then we went on a baby moon. We only went to Bermuda. But even though I was feeling better, I still wasn't feeling like,
you probably can't fully relax.
I could never fully relax.
Is it like every time you go to the bathroom, you're like, please don't be blood. Like I remember feeling that way when I was going through it as well.
And then I started getting like Braxton Hicks contractions, and I'm like, oh my God.
And how far along are you at this point on your baby moon?
Baby moon was over the summer. Farrah was born in October, so I was just a couple months out, but early enough that
it still would be an issue
because I knew that this reabsorption process of twin B could potentially cause preterm labor. We're supposed to be enjoying our baby moon, and all I wanted to do was get on a plane and go back home. And Bermuda isn't even that far from New York. It was like an hour and a half flight. I was like, I just need to get on a plane and go home. I need to be within driving distance of my doctor.
Yeah.
But we stayed the whole, it was a long weekend. It's not like we were there for a long time.
Yeah.
And we went home. And then after all of this, I ended up delivering a very healthy baby a day late.
Wow. A day late than your due date?
And ironically, my due date was October 13th, which is the date that Craig and I went on our first date together.
Oh, wow.
And my daughter Farrah was born October 14th, 2009.
Oh, Farrah. So she is how old now? 9?
She is now 9 years old.
Okay.
She's in 3rd grade. She is terrific. She's super smart. She loves gymnastics.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. I had been scared about the delivery I had asked my doctor ahead of time, what can because, I had aborted twin B, what can I expect? They said, if anything, it'll just be like maybe a little film or something like, but I think it had just totally reabsorbed.
Okay.
They tested Farrah's placenta to see if they could determine anything.
Yeah.
They said it was a nondescript placenta issue.
Okay.
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 But I had a healthy baby, and that's what mattered.
Yay. So do you think that you might ever mention the twin to her, or have you, or?
She actually knows about her twin.
Okay. How did you tell her?
I didn't tell her directly. She had been like getting headaches. And so I took her to a doctor, and he said, "Oh, did you have a normal pregnancy?" And she was sitting on the little couch kind of next to me, but like reading a book, playing things. And I thought that she was totally, ignoring
In
it.
her own world, yeah.
And I said, no, she actually had a twin, and I lost her twin at 18 weeks. And then she didn't say anything about it. And then we had a babysitter one time, and when we got home, Farrah was sound asleep, and our babysitter says, "Oh, Farrah kept saying I'm a twin." And I kept saying, "No, you're not a twin." And I was like, actually she was, and apparently she was paying attention when I was talking.
Interesting.
So she knows that she had a twin, and that the baby died when I was pregnant, and that, she hasn't asked anything further. Mm-hmm. As she gets older and she's learning more, I can give her more details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she does know about that.
So you did go on to have another baby. Can you tell me a little bit about that? It wasn't necessarily an infertility issue, right? But or was it?
It started off a little bit. Initially, I had said to Craig, if I can't get pregnant on my own, I don't want to do this again, because we have a baby now. I can't do all the hormones. I can't do that just abject, awful feeling like of just depression and feeling sad when we have a baby. Mm-hmm. I can't do it again. Mm-hmm. So it's either natural or nothing. Mm-hmm. So we started trying, legs up in the air. I hadn't even gone to the fertility doctor. I just said to my OB, I know that this oral progesterone pill used as a suppository worked to stop my spotting. Can you prescribe it? She said, sure, no problem. So because of that, again, I had to do a pregnancy test every single month to know, do I need to stop the progesterone or do I continue, because the progesterone was suppressing my period. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't getting pregnant. So I made an appointment with my fertility doctor. And I go in.
Same doctor?
Same doctor.
Okay.
Go in at 5 months, and like, boom, there's my file that's like inches thick. And I said to him, I think you are an amazing doctor, but with all due respect, I was hoping to never have to see you again. Yeah. He's like, no, I totally understand. And he said to me, here's the deal. We're going to do an ultrasound. We're going to see where you are right now. He said, but I do not believe in reinventing the wheel, his words. We're just going to go right to IVF. I said, that is fine with me. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go through all that again. We know IVF worked. Just do it. Be done with it.
Yep.
So we go in to the exam room, and he's doing an ultrasound. He said, oh, it looks like you're about to ovulate. I said, well, yeah, count, that's my calendar count too. And I've been doing the ovulation kits. So that's what I thought. He said, yeah, I'd say in like the next day or so. He's like, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the prescription for the birth control pill, which is the start of the IVF process. Fill it. He said, but you know what? And in his words, give it one last college try and see what happens. So I was fully expecting that there was no way I'm getting pregnant. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised because the endometriosis supposedly couldn't have come back that quickly my daughter was born 2009. Let's say we started trying again about a year later. Mm-hmm. So the likelihood of the endometriosis coming back that quickly was actually pretty slim. Mm-hmm. So I was like, why am I not getting pregnant? But nonetheless, go through the IVF. I went to the pharmacy. I filled the birth control pill. And we gave it one last college try, as my doctor suggested. And then it was and I was using the progesterone, and then it was Father's Day. And Craig went to play golf with his brother and his father for Father's Day, and then he was coming back to get me, and then we were going to go to my parents' house in New Jersey for Father's Day. And I was home with Farrah, and I heard her on the monitor waking up, and I got up and I went to the bathroom and I peed, and I was like, oh crap, I was supposed to pee on a stick. And I'd forgotten. So I like downed a glass of water, I go in and I get Farrah, and I was like, ooh, maybe there's a slight feeling, maybe I have to pee. So I go and I pee on the stick, and it's like 3 drops, and it's like, you know, the thing comes up like error insufficient. I was like, crap. And like,
I've done the thing where I've forgotten, and then you like dip it in the toilet, like hoping that might work. It doesn't.
Oh, okay, because I hadn't even thought about that until like you said that just now. I was like, oh, that would have been so much easier, but apparently that doesn't work.
Ineffective.
So I think they come with like 2 or 3 tests in a kit. So I said, fine, I'll bring this to my parents' house. So we go to my parents' house with Craig and Farrah. And I go upstairs to go to the bathroom. And my bathroom growing up was like right at the top of the stairs. So I go and I pee, and it says pregnant. And I call down to Craig. I'm like, Craig, can you come here? And he calls from the living room. He's like, what? I'm like, can you come here? He's like, what? I'm like, seriously, please come here. So he comes to the bottom of the stairs. And he's like, what? I'm like, oh my God, just come up the stairs, please. He's like, what is the matter? I was like, seriously, please come up here. So I come up. He comes up, and I'm like, happy Father's Day.
Oh my God, it was on Father's Day.
It was on Father's Day, and it said pregnant. And he was like, oh my God.
Oh.
So we were really, really excited. So my aunt was there, and I was like, dude, tell Aunt Julie. And he's like, whatever you want to do. I was like, you know what? She's here. And
how could you not?
I know.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs, and I was like, Farrah's going to be a big sister. And I was crying, and my mom was crying, and my aunt was crying. So we were all very excited.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's so good.
Everything's going well. Again, no nausea, like barely know that I'm pregnant. The progesterone is working wonderfully. I am not spotting at all. 15 weeks comes around, and I go to my OBGYN, and I said, ugh, the dreaded quad screen. She said, every pregnancy is different. Just because last time was really bad has nothing to do with this time. I said, okay. So she draws my blood, and a couple days later, I get a phone call. It came back wildly abnormal again, and you have an appointment to get an ultrasound today. And again, Craig was playing golf.
Plays a lot of golf. It's all right.
He plays a lot of golf.
He's a good man.
I love him dearly. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. And I called him, and I said, it's really bad again. You have to come to the appointment with me again. I can't do this alone.
Yeah.
So I think he had just teed off the first hole, and he said to his father and his brother, see you soon. I'm going. And I was sobbing.
Scary.
We get to the appointment, and I'm like crying as the tech is taking me to the room, and she's like, what's, because she has no idea why she's doing this scan. She says, what's wrong? I said, I don't think there's going to be any fluid in here. And just as an aside, with my pregnancy with Farrah, after having lost the other baby, every ultrasound I had was, how's the fluid level? How's the fluid level? So we go in, and I said, how's the fluid level? She said, fluid level's totally fine.
Okay.
I said, okay.
Check that box.
Check
Next.
that box. Spina bifida? No. Everything looks fine. Okay. So it turns out the fetal specialist who I had the first time came in and said, oh, I see what happened last time. He said, what it looks like this time is, again, probably a placenta issue, but the baby just isn't the baby was in the 25th percentile, I think, for growth. And they said that it's something that will likely manifest in the 3rd trimester, so they wanted to monitor me. And they kept doing ultrasounds because if I were going to do something to abort the pregnancy, there's a time limit for that. Mm-hmm. So I was having ultrasounds.
I'm just thinking back to every single time you go in for one of those tests. It is just the worst, and it's so scary, and there's all you're waiting is for them to give you the outcome, and it seems like it takes forever, and it's just I'm getting PTSD right now, like flashbacks. No, it's okay. But really, I remember like going in for those scans and those tests and listening for the heartbeat, and all you want is for them to say it's okay.
Yeah. So I was doing ultrasounds every other week, and I was doing non-stress tests every single week. And then third trimester hit, and just like they said, she dropped to the 20th percentile for weight. And then the following week, she dropped to the 15th percentile weight, and then the 10th percentile, and she was just dropping. And my doctor said to me, if the baby's growth continues to drop, we're going to have to deliver early. And I kind of knew that had been an option. So I had I had a steroid injection to develop the lungs quicker in case I needed to deliver early. And then all of a sudden at 33 weeks, I was eating lunch by myself in Deppenor on Wythe and North 3rd. And
I've been there many times.
And
it's by SoulCycle.
It's right by SoulCycle. And my phone rings, and it's my doctor, and she said, so you're delivering next week. Pick a day.
Whoa.
So I go in the night of the 17th, and they gave me, I think it's called Cervidil.
Okay. So they weren't going to do a C-section. They were going to have you be induced.
They allowed me to
why?
Yes, because I had, despite all my problems with my pregnancy, I delivered very easily with Farrah.
Okay.
I think I pushed for half an hour.
Okay.
That was it. One of the things, by the way, the fetal specialist did say was when Farrah was born a day late, she was 5 pounds, 14 ounces. So he said, well, the good thing is you deliver healthy but small babies. So that's a good thing.
Okay.
So they give me the Cervidil, which is supposed to start inducing labor. But again, I'm exactly 34 weeks. My body isn't even close to being ready for labor at this point. So then they give me Pitocin the next day. They're like, oh, you're fingertip dilated, to which I later found out they were just being very generous. I was barely, not even a fingertip.
Okay.
And I spent the entire day in that room
just waiting
and waiting. And my doctor came in and she said, okay, we're going to break your water to see if that speeds things up. But the bag of amniotic fluid, because as the baby gets bigger, it takes up more space, and then the fluid naturally starts to go down towards the end of pregnancy. But she was so small, and there was so much fluid. She was actually the doctor was having trouble breaking
popping
my water.
The balloon.
Oh my God, it was like a waterfall.
Whoosh.
My doctor had to change her scrubs.
Oh, wow.
It was awful. Probably TMI for this, but whatever.
No, this is all TMI. This podcast should just be called TMI.
So she broke my water, and at some point I'm starting to think I'm probably going to need a C-section. I'm not progressing. The Pitocin isn't working. And now they broke my water, and I have to deliver. And if I'm not delivering on my own, they're going to do a C-section. And finally, I'd say at about 6 p.m, I was all of a sudden fully dilated.
Whoa.
Well, at one point I was finally 4 centimeters, and about an hour later I was like fully dilated. And so they said, okay. So they kicked my parents and my in-laws out of the room. And so the nurse was there, and the doctor was getting, scrubbed up and everything. And the nurse says, let's just do a practice push. And keep in mind, like I'm about to have a small baby.
Right. Oh, gosh.
So I do a practice push, and she's like, stop!
Oh.
Because I already pushed her halfway down the vaginal canal.
Whoa.
With like half a push. So then the doctor comes, and they're kind of waiting, and they said, all of a sudden the nurse said, baby's heart, and I'm sitting here like, I can hear you. The baby's heart rate is lower than mom's, and I'm sitting here like, I can hear you.
Oh God.
And they're like, well, the NICU team isn't here yet, da-da-da. So the doctor says fine. So she's push again. So now I do a full push. So this is now 1.5 pushes, and I'm like, she's all the way about to crown. Stop. Fine. Push again. So that's 2.5 pushes. Head is out. And now I just see the head between my legs, and I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, and I was like, oh my God, it's so small, because this was like such a tiny head. And then she said, push again, and it was out. So 3.5 pushes, and I delivered a baby. And my beautiful Millie 3 pounds 5 ounces.
Oh, tiny little angel baby.
Tiny. And at 34 weeks, she probably should have been at least 5 pounds.
Okay.
So it was, I
Did you get to hold her before they whisked her away?
I did not. They wrapped her up. It was kind of like, the pictures that you see of parents who have C-section babies where the mother is lying there. They're holding her up. I'm lying down. I'm like, smile.
Right.
And then they just they whisked her off. They wanted her to get her into
straight
the incubator,
to the NICU. Yeah.
Into the NICU. And but thankfully,
but healthy.
Healthy. She was basically just a grower feeder. She did need an NG tube at one point, nasogastric tube to feed. And it was funny because she was my second baby, so my milk came in so fast, and with Farrah, it came in so slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And she was only able to get like 1 cc of milk at a time, and I was producing 2 ounces, which is 60 cc's.
Wow.
So I was not allowed to breastfeed her.
Okay.
Because it was too much for her.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just pumping and pumping, and so. But she had a nasogastric tube for a little. She was under the UV lights for a little because she became a little jaundiced. Mm-hmm. But other than that, she was in the NICU for just under 3 weeks.
Oh.
She could have come home a couple days earlier, except Farrah came down with a stomach bug and was throwing up all over our apartment and all over me. And I actually didn't get to go to the NICU for a couple days because I couldn't risk if I were going to get sick or if I had something on me. So
yeah.
So the doctor said, okay, we're going to keep her here a couple more days until your other daughter's healthy. And she came home and Millie came home. She wasn't even 4 pounds. She was 3 pounds, 15 ounces when she came home.
Wow. Is she still pretty small?
She's still small.
Yeah.
But she maintains her growth.
Yeah.
She's, I think, 5th percentile for height and 7th percentile for weight or something. So she's just my little Millie Moo.
So Farrah and Millie.
9 and 7.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. So, what an emotional roller coaster.
Horrible pregnancies, but thankfully 2 healthy, amazing daughters that I love to death.
Yeah. So is there anything that you could say to people who might be struggling right now about, infertility or just hopefulness in general?
To be utterly frank, it sucks. It really does. And I think sometimes you just need to hear somebody like acknowledge that it just sucks, because so many people are going to say it's okay, it's going to work out, and sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Mm-hmm. And it's being able to get to that place where you're okay with it, because I wanted nothing more than to be pregnant and to have my own kids, but I seriously started considering surrogacy. And personally, I was more leaning towards surrogacy than adoption. Mm-hmm. That was my personal feeling. But then I ended up being able to get pregnant. But I mean, taking from somebody who took almost 2 years just to get pregnant for the first time in my entire life. And I remember listening to your podcast, and I thought the same thing. You're a teenager, and they're like, if you have sex, you're going to get pregnant. And it's like, get me pregnant.
Right.
So, to everybody out there, like, I know where you're coming from, and it's hard, and you just have to kind of take it day by day, and you have to be hopeful.
And talk about it.
And
find your people and talk about it, because it does help.
I say to everybody, I understand that it's people I know that are going through it. It's a private issue. But if you want to talk about it, I am here to listen. Mm-hmm. And, if you want to hear my story, I'm happy to share my story. Because it helps to know that other people are going through the same thing that you're going through. Yeah.
And you shared it so beautifully and so articulately, and that was awesome. So thank you for everything. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey again, guys. Thank you so much for listening to Shira's story, and thanks again to Shira for telling us all the details and reliving that. I'm sure it was not easy to go to some of those places. So we are 19 episodes into this whole thing, and we keep growing and growing, and I'm so proud of what we've done and all the people who've come forward to share their stories, Shira and everyone else included. I would love it if you guys would do me a favor and think of a person or two that might benefit from hearing some of these stories. Maybe somebody who's struggling, maybe somebody who did and might want to, go back and kind of remember what they went through. But if you can think of somebody, share the podcast with them, send it to them, ask them to subscribe. I would be forever indebted. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you guys next time.